I grew up in Ohio, moved to Detroit when I was a kid, and there were live DJs on the radio when I was a kid, so I always used to listen to the DJs at the club. When I turned 16, I couldn't get a job at the record store because it was hard to get a job at the record store. So I got a job at a car wash next to a record store so I could spend all my money after I was done earning it at the car wash at the record store. And I just collected records like when I was in middle school and high school. And then I got my first job when I was like 17, just hustling crates for somebody, like a bigger DJ in Detroit. And then he ended up leaving, I ended up taking his spot. And then I was producing techno and doing Detroit stuff. And I don't know, I've been a DJ ever since.
Well, I got my first start. I kind of was spoiled at 2 years old. My uncle was a big DJ in Philadelphia, so he started me when I was very young. He got me my first turntables when I was 2, which were like the Sony, my first record player, and like the Jackson 5 records. So I did that all the way till 5, and then, till 10, 11, 12, high school. I started DJing little parties and my aunt's wedding, got to college and started, moving professionally into doing some clubs, some pajama jammy jams, you know what I'm saying, some, student center parties. And then I got my first lift off in 2000. I went on the road with Timberland and Miss Jade. And that was kind of like the real, kickoff for me getting out of school because, at that time Ricky Lake was out and I got the DJ on them shows with Timberland and Miss Jade and Bubba Sparks. And, I just was like, F school.
For me, I'm originally from Ohio. I live in New York now. I grew up in a town called Youngstown where there was no hip hop, no urban radio. We didn't have BT. We had MTV. That was it. So like my introduction to DJ culture was watching Yo MTV Raps once a week, and then finally they made it daily. And I think these guys can relate. We all probably taped it on our VHS tapes back in the day, and we'll watch it over and over again. And then I would just try to figure out, like, how did they do that? How do they do that? Listen to people like Jazzy Jeff and anything I could buy at like Kmart in the Midwest, which would kind of like give me any sort of introduction to DJ culture. And then when I moved to Cleveland to go to college, started doing college radio, and I kind of put it all together at that point. And it followed the same trajectory that I think most people follow, going from college radio to underground parties, then you slightly become a little bit more commercial, and then you're doing like the regular clubs, and then you get maybe commercial radio, and then from there on, I started doing mixtape stuff. Don can relate to that. And then, why you laugh? I meant that complimentary.
Yeah. No.
And then from that point on, it became just as much as your talent and your vision as your connections and your networking and your branding. And at that point, I kind of put all of that together to kind of create where I wanted to be at this point in my life. One thing that helped set my career apart was just really diversifying what I'm trying to do. I came, like I said a minute ago, from the underground hip-hop world and moved to the commercial hip-hop world. And then there was a point, maybe 5-7 years ago, where it just became, why limit yourself to one particular genre, one particular thing? And I think, a lot of people, us on the stage and many, many others, probably a lot of people out in this room kind of reached that point where the world is changing, technology has changed, people are listening to everything. You don't need to put yourself in a box anymore. And so for me, it was kind of like the era of like, I hate the word mashups. I think that word sucks because when I hear the word mashup, I think like some Britney Spears over like a Biggie beat, or like Miley Cyrus over like Lynyrd Skynyrd or something. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, why would you do that? I mean, I understand why you do it, because it's funny once, and then you never want to hear it again, But if you could do something using that same thought process, but make it make sense, like, why can't you take that same creativity but put it towards what you feel should happen in the music industry? So like, we did this Jay-Z Coldplay thing called Viva La Hova it got really popular. It wasn't as popular as like the Grey album that Danger Mouse did, but it was like close. It was like second, like not 1 and 2, it'd be like 1 and like 5 or something. I don't know. Anyways, it really helped me, and it helped kind of redefine where I wanted my career to go after that point.
I realized it by listening to what I was doing. Like, I had a Roland 1680, and that was probably the most popular machine out at that time, in the early 2000s, maybe late 90s. And when I'm using this machine, I thought that was the end-all, tell-all, you know what I mean? Yeah. But, when it was like, you have to get Pro Tools, and you have to get, a Mac, and and I was like, wow, this sounds awesome. You know what I mean? Then I moved, I tried somebody's Pro Tools, somebody hit me to it, and I tried to learn it a little bit. And then when I got to the Pro Tools, I was like, wow, this does sound way better. You know what I mean? So it just constantly evolves, like where you're going. And now, I went from the ASR to Logic to Machine. Now I'm on Ableton. I've made a beat in Serato. I did one at FAMU. I did a demonstration, and I was just messing around. I was using the cue buttons, but I made a beat, out of a Michael Jackson record. So, like, it keeps evolving. I seen a DJ use an iPad one time, and I was just like, you really gonna do your whole set on the iPad? You know what I'm saying? And I was just like, man, I gotta catch up a little bit. But technology, tends to do it. And I use different things for, different moods. I might go in the studio today, and I may say, you know what, I'm gonna make a beat on a 3000. Just for a texture. You know what I mean? Because I base everything on texture. So I might do that. I might, do a computer, which is digital, or like you said, use an 808, machine or whatever. It's technology.
Yeah.
I think you said something interesting when you mentioned Serato, because I have two theories about how Serato has impacted not only just the DJ world, but also just like the taste of consumers around the world and what they like musically. First thing is on the DJ level, when Serato came out and all the competitors of Serato, Final Scratch and all that, and Tractor came out like 2005-ish or whatever. You can go to Guitar Center and you spend $500 and you're good. And you have this device that previously, as a DJ, you were limited by a couple, finite variables to how your career could expand. What you could buy, which would, if you're not a millionaire, you couldn't buy every single song. You couldn't buy every genre of music. You could only buy what you could afford, like how they were saying, like the record store by the car wash and all that stuff. You were limited by what you could carry. So if you were going to do a gig that night, and even if you brought your friends and you brought 8 crates of records, that could get you through a 6-hour hip-hop party with R&B. That wasn't going to get you a 20-minute indie rock set and a 2-hour house set and all that stuff thrown in, because you were limited by, again, the physicalness of what you could buy and what you could carry. And then the other thing that was really interesting about that was, DJs weren't, there were DJs that traveled the world and did all that stuff. Like you had, the big house guys and the Kid Capris of the world, but they were few and far between, and they were mega stars in our world because of that, because they got booked. Now we're all hopping flights every single day, going to all these different cities. Guys who don't even have business doing that are doing that. People who have business doing that are making mega careers out of it, but we're all able to do that because of this $500 box that we stick in your backpack. And it's just like, I've always wondered if I was Mr. Serato, or whatever the hell his name is, and I knew that DJs would become, not me, but there's a lot of DJs that have probably become millionaires off of what Serato has allowed people to do. And not just DJs, clubs, promoters, liquor companies have all profited off this open format culture, which is my next point. All because of this $500 device, because you can now create DJs into stars, whereas previously very few DJs became stars. Now every DJ had the capacity to become a star. So I think that was one of the biggest pricing, snafus in technology history, when you think of all the millions and billions of dollars that have been made because of what this $500 device allowed. My other point with that, also involving that, is simply the whole rise of open format DJing, where and any DJ who is not just playing there. If you're a house DJ, you were just a house DJ. If you were a hip hop guy, you played hip hop. Blah blah blah. Again, it was limited by those things that I said before, what you could afford and what you could carry. Now you're in a position where you can have all of that. Even if I'm not an indie rock guy and Don's an indie rock guy, because he looks like an indie rock guy, like he's gonna give me a flash drive when I come to Atlanta and be like, yo, this is what you need. Or when he would come, if he would come to where I'm like, yo, if you're playing in my city, this is what you need. You could stack up every single genre of music, every single whatever, and have all of that. And that kind of gave rise to open format DJing, and clubs, that became like the new thing for clubs, where before it was like, okay, you're in this city, okay, all the black people are going to hip hop club, all the white people are going to the top 40 club, all the Spanish people are going here like freestyle and all that stuff. Now every club plays everything, and it made music so much better. So you get guys like him producing all this amazing stuff that for artists that has all these different influences. And you have Don creating all this stuff, and people who previously would have never went to somebody that was maybe started off as a hip hop producer to do stuff, all simply because the whole culture of music changed, because top 40 radio, hip hop radio, everything just became this big thing simply because of what DJs are playing, because DJs can now play all of that stuff. And I feel like nobody ever really discusses that, because it's like it all comes from that little box. Like we wouldn't have any of this open format, the Vegas DJ scene, all of that stuff. None of that would be anywhere near where it is if this didn't happen.
And I think another thing too is like the ability to create something on the spot and play it that night. Like if you made it,
Exactly.
like the DJs that were
That's
superstars
also great.
before had to make their stuff, get it out to a dub plate, press it as a dub plate,
Right.
play it, and then, you know what I mean, if you want to try something out.
about that.
And if you were a superstar DJ before, you were cutting records, like those records were your
Massive
calling
things like
card.
that, yeah.
Now, DJs are forced to produce, because back in the day, like if I remember this specifically, you show up at a DJ who was a hot DJ, he'd blank out his record labels because he didn't want you to know what he was playing. Because that DJ playing that club and that song in that club made him the hot DJ, because he had this cut that nobody else had.
I read that Cool Herc used to soak his in a bathtub.
Right, yeah,
Like
exactly. So it's like now DJs are forced to do their own edits and their own mixes and their own blends to set themselves apart from everybody, but the technology's there to do it, which I think makes DJs moving into producers like learn, you know what I'm saying, the protocol to actually create music to play for people that set them apart from somebody else. If you make a hot remix, you know what I'm saying? Like it can take you super far down, you know what I mean, as a DJ. Like if everybody's playing the DJ Don Cannon remix of stuff, then you know what I mean, people want to see Don Cannon in that club. The same way it used to be when you were pressing up your own records, except for now, you can do it in a day instead of doing it in 3 weeks, you know?
Right.